The theory goes that poor people borrow money to buy jet skis, snowmobiles, and a bunch of crazy lifted half-ton trucks. And so that's why they're poor, because they go into debt to buy items that don't put any money in their pocket. The theory is that rich people don't do this. Instead, what they do is they borrow a bunch of money to buy assets that put money in their pocket. There's a piece missing from this. What happens when the rich people borrow too much money on these assets that are supposed to put money in their pocket, yet now the money that those assets create don't even cover the interest on the loans that they took out on those assets? See, that's never talked about for whatever reason. Like, you'll never hear that at the airport Marriott scam that you go to. You'll never hear that from any of these people, any of the people selling you classes to go and learn to become rich overnight. Yeah, you'll never hear that from those guys, because that's actually what's happened in today's world, is that a bunch of idiots have borrowed so much money. And I'm not just talking about, like, you're thinking like, oh, the billionaires. No. Boomers have done this. Virtually everybody who could go to the bank and the bank would approve a deal borrowed a whole bunch of money to buy a bunch of assets. The theory being, oh, I'm going to buy all these assets and they're going to put money in my pocket. And then the assets no longer produce the money. I live in Houston, Texas, right on the 8. There are dozens of empty buildings. And I'm not talking about like, oh, little 2-story buildings and like some strip malls. No. I mean like multi-store mid-rise buildings all down there. And they're all boarded up and nobody's in them. There's tons of these buildings and they're all over the city. They're everywhere. These were supposed to be, in theory, I guess, purchased for these absurd prices. And then they were going to produce a bunch of money. And then, of course, they don't, because it's dependent upon if you can get people to keep paying you these ridiculous rents. And then you didn't pay attention, the so-called rich people who borrow this stupid money, didn't pay attention that, well, there's a threshold, business-wise. At a certain point, you go beyond the market. And I've talked about this stuff here, and this is probably the most boring channel that you'll ever find, but if you want to thoroughly destroy your opponent in an argument about business or economics, I can do it for you. I can explain to you exactly how to pretty much thoroughly destroy everybody. And it doesn't matter if they're arguing from the capitalist perspective, the communist perspective, the socialist, it doesn't make any difference. They can all be thoroughly destroyed by just pointing this kind of stuff out, because usually this stuff is fueled with endless amounts of debt, and it's just debt upon debt upon debt, and that is what we're watching happen right now all over the country. The theory is, oh, well, let's grow our way out of it, but the birth rates don't support it. So we need to flood the country with a bunch of other people who don't really necessarily want to be Americans. They're just here for some money, thinking that it's going to work out. They get scammed into, some of them just get straight scammed into coming here, and then they get worked into disposable labor, which is what happened. I did a video on that you won't find here. It's actually an exclusive somewhere else. But they turn them into literally disposable labor, not cheap labor. It's even worse. It's worse than cheap labor. It's disposable labor, to where you're not even treating these people like human beings, which is really horrible. So I'll ask again, what happens when you pay too much for these so-called assets and they no longer cover even the interest payments on all of the money you borrowed? Well, then you need to bail out. And for whatever reason, the last several administrations are just obsessed with keeping the same people. See, what should happen is that they would go bankrupt and then all those assets get sold off for basically nothing, because they're not worth anything. In fact, those aforementioned buildings in Houston, you couldn't give me one of those buildings, because the cost to tear the building down and haul all of it away, even with the scrap, would be more than the property itself is even worth. The land isn't even worth that much. So it would be a net negative number. Some of those buildings are probably owned by the county at this point, and the county can't really do anything with them because, again, same thing. It would cost them more money to deal with the building than just let it sit there and rot. So when stuff like this happens, these are supposed to go to zero. The challenge is that all those banks who lent all this money, then on their balance sheets, the asset goes to zero on their balance sheets as well, and it shows them having lent all this money on completely worthless assets. This is a major problem, and it's one that I talk about a lot here. But for some reason, it just doesn't get out there to anybody. I don't know why. I don't know if it's... I admit, I'm a boring guy. I like it that way, frankly. But what I'm explaining should be extremely important to everybody out there trying to figure out why it is that everything is falling apart, and all of these so-called rich people that are all fake rich now, they don't have pot to piss in or whatever to throw it out of, all these fake rich people are constantly being bailed out to keep the same, like literally the same people where they are, instead of letting them fail miserably like they're supposed to. You know, like how capitalism is supposed to operate. You know, when you mess stuff up, you actually fail, instead of just making everybody else fail for you in your stead, and running to get endless bailouts from whatever sycophant is pretending to be the king dingling of this nonsense. That's all I have to say on that issue.